In this video, we're going to talk about NanoMesh clones. NanoMesh clones allow us to take a single object and then clone it across the surface of a model. So we can basically create something like a costume element, in this case, a little greeble or a pad for this spacesuit. And we can sculpt one copy of it and then see it in situ, in placement on the model, updating as we change the original. So let's take a look at how this works. We're going to begin by appending a new subtool into our subtool stack. Now this tool is available for you to download. I have it organized into 2 folders because it's more tidy that way. There's a lot of little costume parts to this. I will click append, and I will append a polymesh star in. Now the difference between append and insert is insert inserts a subtool underneath your selection in the subtool stack. Append puts it at the bottom. So the polymesh star is now here, and this is just a generic mesh. I am going to press the W key, maybe scale it down, maybe move it down a little bit here, move it to about there maybe. Now I am going to take this and I am going to use this as my base tool. This is my currently selected tool. I am going to change this into a polysphere. Okay. Now there's no subdivision levels in this sphere. I'm going to go to B for brush, I for insert, and select IMM primitives H. This brush allows me to insert this tool here, a single polyplane. Select that. Now even though the sphere is selected, if I turn on X symmetry, I can come up here and I can click drag and I can draw 2 planes right there on either side of the shoulders. Let's actually put them right here. Let's put some shoulder pads here. We'll put 2 planes right here. Okay. Now you'll see that it has masked the surface that I actually was selected when I drew those planes. So I need to split these into 2 different subtools now. Now there's 2 ways I can do that. I can hide part of the mesh and go to subtool, split hidden, or I can take advantage of the auto masking and click split unmasked points. Now I've got a sphere tool, subtool, and a planes subtool. Now the planes are going to be the surface that we draw our nanomesh onto. The sphere is going to be what we're going to generate our nanomesh brush from. So let's just select the sphere and solo it. Now I just want to create a base shape for my my pad here. So make sure that we are on the move gizmo, and I'm just going to unlock the gizmo, reset it, lock it again, maybe scale it down a little bit in the Z axis. Let's turn off X symmetry and go to the unmasked mesh center, scale it up in Y. Now I know that this is going to be a pad, so it needs some kind of curvature to it. So I'll go to the gizmo and I'll go to bend curve. This is the bend deformer. I can change my curve resolution here. Now if it's in the wrong axis, I'll use this slider or this cone here to change the axis, but this is the correct axis. Now I want to turn on my symmetry. I'll set that to 1. So if I grab these points, they'll move symmetrically. So now I can just create a bit of curvature to this shape. Maybe I'll grab these, bring them out so it's not quite so acute in its angle. There we go. Now if I'm happy with that, I click the gear icon and select accept. Now this is going to be the basis of my insert mesh brush. We're going to create a brush like this one that inserted a poly, but this is going to insert the shoulder pad. So with the pad oriented on screen, the way I want it to grow out of the surface, I will go to brush, create insert mesh brush, and just say new. We don't want to append it into that existing brush. So it's created a new insert mesh brush. Now we have another video entirely on creating insert mesh brushes, as well as another video on NanoMesh. So the different tools that we're using in this demo, we also have full videos that delve into those tools in even more depth. But we're looking now how to combine these together to create NanoMesh clones. This is a new thing in ZBrush 2021. So I've got an insert mesh brush now, and insert mesh brushes you can turn into what are called nanomesh brushes, and we want to do that. I want to transform this from an insert mesh brush into a nanomesh brush so I can then draw this onto those planes we created. So it's very easy to do with my insert mesh brush selected. Go to brush, create a nanomesh brush, and say OK. there we have it. This is now a NanoMesh brush. So if I go to my polyplanes here, let's turn off solo and zoom out and go back up to our shoulder pads here, or shoulder planes, I should say. You see that it's defaulted now to the Z Modeler brush, and it's set to insert NanoMesh on a single poly. So if I click drag, it's going to draw those pads onto a single poly like that. Now the orientation is not right, so we'll need to go to our NanoMesh menu and change that. If this had been one model, like if this was not two separate planes, you can actually correct your NanoMesh orientation by going to Geometry, Modify Topology, and there is an Align Edge button here. You can also spin the edges here, but because these are two separate polygons, I need to actually spin them separately. So what I'll do is I will close out of the Modify Topology, go to the NanoMesh menu, and under NanoMesh, you can see we've got all the different settings to control our NanoMesh. The first thing I'll do is set it to fit. That fits it proportionally to the plane. Now I can change the size here if I want to, and I just want to get the orientation right. So I'm going to change my rotation so it looks good. Now this one obviously doesn't, so turn off X symmetry because I only want to affect this plane here. Press the space bar and select spin edges. Be careful not to select spins. That will trip up a lot of people. Spin edges is the one you want, and you just want a single poly. So now watch what happens when I click. It spins the edges. So now I can make these unified. Now these are not sculptable meshes. These are nanomeshes, and nanomeshes in and of themselves are instances. They are clones. What's special about this workflow and what's new in ZBrush 2021 is the Edit Mesh button and the ability to use that in conjunction with split screen. So you remember down here we have our subtool where we created the basis of that shoulder pad. If I go to my subtool menu and select that, we can get rid of it now. We don't need this anymore. This can go away. So click OK. Now here in the polys, the polyplanes where we have our nanomeshes, everything we need to manipulate these is here inside this nanomesh. So all I need to do is go back to my NanoMesh menu. Let's close out of Geometry so it's a bit cleaner. And you see we've got Show Placement and Show Instance. If I turn off Show Placement, that turns off those polyplanes, which can make it easier to see things. If I turn off Show Instances, then I don't see my instances anymore. I just see the polyplanes, which is actually not terribly useful. So we'll turn on the instances again. Now what's very cool is if I turn off Show Placement and then turn on Edit Mesh, I'll get a split screen. So now I've got this split screen where I can actually manipulate this object and I can see it update over here. So I'm not quite happy with their placement just yet. So I'm going to turn off Edit Mesh. And if I mouse over, you see those planes are still there. All right. So I am going to go to the Transpose Gizmo, turn on X Symmetry, and turn on Local Symmetry right here. And I'm just going to rotate these planes, and the resulting mesh follows suit. So there we go. You see we can actually place these shoulder pads far more accurately, just like this. I can even scale them a little bit in the y-axis, maybe rotate, oops, that's scale, rotate them a little bit, move them back this way. There we go. All right, so let's go to our subtools here, and I am going to turn off the costume. So we just have these, and then I'm going to go back to my NanoMesh and Edit Mesh. So now you see I can actually zoom in and out, and I'm not seeing the rest of the costume. I'm just seeing those subtools which are currently visible. So if you want to isolate something, you can turn off the other subtools before you go into your split screen. Now your split screen you can change. You can do top and bottom, do something like this. You can do version 3, which just flips left and right. Version 4, which flips top and bottom. Usually I just leave it here at 1. Now, split screen is also found under the transform menu. You see here, there's also a split screen option as well. So here I have my edit mesh. Now I can change this and do anything to this. This will update pretty much anything except for dynamic subdivision levels, which is in and of itself pretty amazing. So if I start subdividing this and then start making changes to it, I'll turn on my X symmetry and I'll take just the move brush and then make changes with the move brush. You see it updates over there on the other side. However, you notice because my mesh was actually so kind of equilateral, we have it flipped. You see it's the bottom is the top and the top is the bottom. So I can do this. I can go to my transform, turn off X symmetry, and I could rotate this around like that, and then go back to my draw, and that's not going to actually do what I want it to do. So what I will need to do in that case is turn off Edit Mesh, turn on Show Placement, and let's go back to Transform, and let's turn Split Screen off. There we go. And let's turn Show Placement, or Show Instances again, and I'm going to have to spin my faces. So this time, I can actually go to Geometry, go to Modify Topology, and Spin Edge. So let's spin those twice. Now, if I go back to Edit Mesh, and then take my Move brush and make a change, now the orientation is correct. So let's turn off that Show Placement. So those planes are no longer there. So I can come in here and I can make changes like this. I can move that up. Maybe from the side here, I want to actually scooch this out. Or what I could even do is go to B for brush, T for trim, go to my trim circle brush, click OK, and then Control Shift click, and that creates this trim circle like this. Let go of that, and you see it's not working because I have subdivision levels. So what I'll need to do is delete my subdivisions, or use the clip curve brush instead. B for brush, C for clip, use clip circle, and I'll just skip that note. Control Shift click. Now, depending on the structure of the geometry, this may or may not work. We go into this in a lot more detail in the clip brushes, but if we've got undercuts, we can end up with something like that where we get these flared edges. So in that case, we're going to want to go ahead and use the trim brush, because the trim brush actually cuts geometry away. So go to B for brush, T for trim, go to trim circle, Control Shift, click and drag. And then I just want to scallop out some area here. And the reason I did that, you can see, is so there's clearance there for the body to move. Now, it would probably be helpful now to actually see the costume again. So we turn that on, and you see why I did that with even more clarity. That just makes that look all the more clean and natural, and it feels like there can be actual articulation there. Let's do the same thing here. Let's clean up this little bit here. I can use the circle for this, and I can get a nice shape like that. You see the effect that that has there. Or I can do something like this. I can go to B for brush, T for trim, and go to my trim curve. And then I will hold Control Shift, click and drag, and it creates this curve. And there's a feathered edge on one side that will be clipped away, and the dotted side, everything on that side will remain. So what I'll do is I will just tap the Alt key, and that allows me to start drawing a curve here like this. And there you see it scallops that out, but not quite what I want. So let me undo that. Sometimes these brushes can be a little bit picky about where you draw from and the shape. There you go. So that's much more effective there. So look at that. We're getting this nice continuation of this line. Now, if I were to take my my mesh here and then rotate it 90 degrees like this, you see what happens there. If I undo that and take this mesh and rotate it like this, you can watch it update in real time, which is super cool. So I'm going to take my move brush and make sure my X symmetry is turned on, and we'll just pull this a little bit forward like that. And now let's add a bit more detail to this. So one thing you might want to be careful with is, I'm going to save my work really quick just by pressing the 9 hotkey that auto saves a project. When I do that, sometimes you'll have to come back and turn on Edit Mesh again. So be aware of that. So if you increase your resolution, so I have increased my resolution to 373,000 faces, go to Clay Tubes brush, sometimes you might get a little bit of a delay as it's updating over here. So just be aware that that could sort of slow things down for you. If so, that's not a problem. All you need to do is turn off show instances. Now you'll be able to sculpt absolutely normally. So maybe I want to go to B for brush, L for layer, and select the layer brush, and then I can use the layer brush to create some shapes like this. Maybe I want to put some little sort of tracery details. And I'm going to use one of my favorite and least known tools in ZBrush under Stroke, Modifiers, Replay Last. And this brush, or this tool, doesn't have its own hotkey. Or I believe it might. I think it's actually the number 1 by default, but I changed this to Alt-1, and I use this all the time. So set a hotkey for this if you don't have one. And what it does is it replays your last stroke. So I haven't done anything since I drew this stroke. But if I were to turn my draw size down, maybe hit the lower bracket key a few times, and then Alt-1, it will replay that stroke. See that? It's replaying it. If I turn my brush size down again and then replay that stroke with Alt-1, you see it's actually creating another one. I could also, let's undo 2 of those. This is really cool. I'll turn on Z sub and turn up my Z intensity, and I'll replay that stroke, and that will create a recess there. It's just, it's the coolest thing. I really, really love this, and I use it all the time. I talk about it in other chapters as well. It's like with alphas, hard surface. It's just one of the most useful and least known about things in ZBrush, in my opinion. I'll go to the Dam Standard brush here, and I'm just going to create a little, make sure that we have our X symmetry turned on so we get it on both sides there. And I want to create a little bit of another bit of tracery or detail there, but I need to turn on Lazy Mouse to get the best possible stroke. So I'll go to the Stroke menu, and I will go to Lazy Mouse, and let's turn Lazy Mouse radius up like this. And I'm going to go to 0 for split screen. I don't actually need to see the instances just yet. I just want to be able to see what I'm working on. I'll turn on solo, and this gives me my full screen resolution, which you might find handy. It's actually how I prefer to work with these tools. So I'm going to draw, and now this is going to give me a little bit of a delay in my stroke, so I can create kind of a sweeping shape like that. Now, I can do another one. If I hold down the Alt key while I'm using the Dam Standard brush, it actually pinches up and creates this really cool raised shape like this. Do something along these lines here. Maybe we'll bring that up and around like this. So we're just getting some cool kind of shapes here. We'll turn our brush size up. I'm using the bracket keys for this, which I don't do often, but if I want to get kind of a precision change so I know I can get back to the exact same size it was, I'll use the brackets, because I'll do 2 up, and then I know if I want to get back to exactly where I was, it's 2 down. So let's go ahead and subtract with this, like that. And let's go back to our layer brush. And I'll take the layer brush. Now, the layer brush works great with alphas as well. I could take something like this alpha and drag rectangle and then just click drag. And I've got that set to subtraction right now. So it's creating kind of a really neat shape. If I set this back to add and then click drag, I can create something that's drawing out just to one flat layer. I can also use some of the other hard surface brushes on this. For example, if I were to go to my light box and go to the brush menu and go to the planar brushes, I can grab the planar cut thin brush, which is great for if I turn off my X symmetry, I can use this. Oops. Let's turn our draw size up a bit. There we go. I can use this to create sort of island greeble shapes, I like to call them. So there we go. We can do a little island shape there, but make sure we got our X symmetry turned back on. So there we go. I can sort of carve out some planes like that or like that, but it's not really working well with what we've got going right now. So I want to show some other things that are really cool that we can do here. I can change my geometry entirely. So even though this is a clone, I could even go in here and I could Dynamesh it. So if I go to Dynamesh and click Dynamesh, and it has multiple subdivision levels, say no, we don't want to enter into dynamic or frozen subdivs. But you can see we lost a lot of detail there. So I'm going to undo that. And in my Dynamesh settings, let's turn on project. That projects onto the original. So I'll turn that on and say no, and see if that doesn't give me a better result. And that actually really does. So I didn't even have to really raise my resolution, but it's a little bit lossy through there. If I undo that, you see. So let's raise that resolution just a little bit, and then Dynamesh. Say no. And there we go. That's much better. So with Dynamesh, of course, I can do insert meshes. So let's say I go to B for brush, I for insert, and grab that IMM primitives, and we'll grab an insert sphere. So if I click and drag to draw these spheres as they are, obviously they're sitting well up on top of the surface. Now, if I take the brush menu and tear this off and go to my modifiers, there's a couple things we can do. I could take my projection strength and turn my projection strength up, and that projects it as it draws, but that's not going to countersink it. So if I bring that back down to 0 and go to depth, here you can see that's what's controlling my depth. If I bring this down and then draw, those draw countersunk into that surface. And I can change how deep they go depending on how deep that's set. So let's do something like this. And let's say we want to do a few more of these. Let's do something like, I'm turning my draw size down, and there we go. We'll draw a couple there. And we'll draw a few here, like that. Now, you'll notice that these are asymmetrical. These shapes here are asymmetrical. This is not actually sitting in symmetrical space right now, but that's not actually a problem. I'll show you how we fix that. Control, click, and drag twice to execute Dynamesh. Now, if I want to resymmetrize this, what I will do is I will go to my deformation menu, and I'm going to use mirror and weld. Now, mirror and weld takes what's on this side and mirrors it over to the other. So I'm just going to mirror it across the x-axis to begin with, and then I will go to geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld across the x-axis. So you see we're on the x-axis here, mirror and weld, and there we go. Let's resymmetrize that. So let's take a look again at how it's looking in NanoMesh. So let's turn on Show Instances and turn off Solo and Show Placement. Let's turn Split Screen back on. And there we can see our instances. So we zoom in here. Let's turn off Show Placement so the gears go away. So there we go. There's our shoulder pads. Now, if I want to change the planes that they're on, I will go to the transpose gizmo. So let's go back over here, and I'm going to turn off edit mesh. I'm going to go to transform, make sure my split screen's turned off. There we go. Now, what I'm rotating here are the planes. So I'm changing the planes. These polyplanes can also be duplicated. So if I hold down the control key, click and drag, I am duplicating those planes, like so. So I could take this, I could maybe countersink this down a little bit, and then I could squash, or like, not squash, pardon me, I could rotate that and scooch that down under there so we get sort of like a laminate kind of layering of our armor here. Bring that out a little bit. Bring that up. Or I can change this and make this an entirely different type of padding. We can take this back here, and we can make elbow pads from this. So I'll just rotate these around. And I want, so you probably don't want the point up there at the top. If it's an elbow pad, it's probably something you want down facing this way. That feels a lot more suitable. It's also unlikely to stab you if it's pointing down that way. So here we can position this one. So I'm not worried about the other one just yet. I'm just positioning this one. So I'm going to rotate that, get that where I want it. And let's see, let's rotate it like this and scale it in X. There we go. Rotate and just bring that out. Now I'm going to control, click and drag to mask this one. And that's going to allow me to go to Unmasked Mesh Center. Let's solo this, and let's turn on Show Placement. I'm going to clear my masks, and I'm going to mask the one that I want to move now. It makes things a little bit easier. Now invert my masking, make sure my X symmetry is turned off. Invert my masking. Now I can move just this one. So I'll go to the Unmasked Mesh Center, and let's turn off Solo. And we'll place this elbow pad in relation to this guy. Ooh, you see, we've got a little bit unmasked up here, so let's get this masked as well. There we go. And now I can move this one and position this on this elbow. Now, I'll hold down the Alt key, and I can change the orientation of the gizmo without changing the shape of the object, so that can be pretty handy. I probably don't want to scale this down smaller. Let's turn off Show Placement so the planes go away. I probably don't want to make this smaller than the other elbow pad. So I will give that a little scale there in that axis because that just makes it fit much, much better. And I'm going to check my other one here and just make sure that that one doesn't need the same treatment, and I think it actually does. So let's turn on Show Placement, mask that, invert the mask, and then turn off Show Placement and go to my gizmo. And once again, I'll just have to go to the Unmasked Mesh Center like this. And if I turn on my placement again, I can then more easily sort of see where this is, change my orientation here, and then I can scale this one. And I'll just rotate that a bit like that. You see, we're actually, you got to be really careful that we actually have everything that we want to not move masked. There we go. So we'll rotate that and turn off Show Placement, and there we go. So these are NanoMesh clones. So as you see, anytime I go to Edit Mesh, I'm able to come in here and change them entirely. So if I wanted to, this is still a Dynamesh. If I went to B for Brush, I for Insert, go to my Insert Primitives. We still have that selected. And select maybe a cylinder. And then with that selected, just click and drag to draw a cylinder through that mesh, like so. And I'll take transpose and move that in, scale it down a little bit. And if I go to frame mode, you see that that has a separate polygroup. If I Control Shift click on this one and go to polygrouping, and under polygroups, if I click group as Dynamesh sub, it'll put a white polygroup on there. And then if I Control click and drag twice, it will execute Dynamesh, and we'll subtract that and create a punch a big hole in there. So now if we go back to our pieces, you'll see they all have a big hole carved in them now. So it's really a very cool and very useful way of working out intricate costume pieces and parts by having it simplified. So you're able to work at it here, on the origin, but then see it in context or in situ on the character. So that is NanoMesh Clones. And like I said, that draws on a lot of different things that we talk about elsewhere, like the NanoMesh tools themselves. So if you have not seen the video yet on NanoMesh, it's quite useful because there's a lot of other stuff that we can do with NanoMesh, but NanoMesh Clones is an application of the tool that is new to 2021. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and you can see ways that you can use this in your own workflows. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next chapter.